Superman is not a known commodity in some places. He's not a big known superhero in places like Batman is. That affects things. That's it. That was the answer. That was the correct answer. He had to put the politics in. He had to inject his own personal feelings into that answer. Because, again, the answer is verifiably, demonstrably false. Why would somebody just single out Superman with quote-unquote anti-American sentiment overseas when they have not seemed to have done that with any other film this year? Just yours, James.
Renegade Online.
Now, we covered one of these articles, or one of these interviews a couple of weeks ago. I know a lot of folks out there had one opinion. I had a little bit different opinion. Because I read I did a cold read on a live show of the interview he did with the Times of London. And I immediately picked up on the fact that the interviewer, Mr. Dean, was really trying to drag the conversation into a political America sucks, Trump bad, which, again, James Gunn politically agrees with all that, as far as I know. But he was trying to drag the interview and the conversation into it. And then, of course, Deadline and Variety and a few other places basically kind of cut and chopped up some of the responses that Gunn did and then put it into a headline that said, James Gunn is a story, or James Gunn said that Superman is a story about an immigrant, or an immigrant story, or something like this, which he never actually said that. So I got a little frustrated with it, but that's the legacy media now. But in this case, this is a little bit different. This is James Gunn doing James Gunn. This is where, by my read, and we'll go through this, he wasn't really asked anything of a political nature, to my knowledge, and injected politics into it. He gave a really good answer right up until a certain point, and then blew his own dick off. James Gunn blames anti-American sentiment for Superman's lower international haul. Now, I'm doing this story at this point because we've already walked through everything leading up to this in terms of what the box office has done, including the international numbers. Comparing it to Man of Steel from back then, we've already discussed how new Superman hauled in about 25 million more-ish than Man of Steel did 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Again, it still doesn't quite adjust for all of the inflationary differences, but it was an overperformance. It got it about at least 2/3 of the way there or so. This is what gets frustrating. This is why I say James Gunn's worst enemy is always himself. And it's stupid stuff like this that just makes it so unnecessary. This is an unforced error. Although Superman continues to dominate the domestic box office after 2 weeks, the Man of Steel hasn't translated quite the same way to international audiences. Director and DC Studios co-CEO James Gunn recently commented on the movie's international haul of $173 million, trailing behind the movie's $253 million domestic gross since opening July 8th. Quote, "We're definitely performing better domestically than we are internationally. But international is also rising and having really good weekday numbers in the same way we are here domestically." This was an interview he did with Rolling Stone, and frankly, I almost refuse to pull up a Rolling Stone article because they're such trash, okay? So Gunn says, obviously, the word of mouth is very positive both here and everywhere else, which is the thing that we needed to do the most. At the same time, there's certain countries in which it's really performing well, Brazil and the UK. James Gunn then continued, Superman is not a known commodity in some places. He's not a big superhero in some places like Batman is. Now, full stop. All of that's correct. He's totally right on. Batman is way bigger in terms of popularity, in terms of merchandise sales, in terms of historical movie tickets and everything else. Much bigger than Superman. Batman is the Spider-Man of DC. He is Totally right. That affects things, he says. And it also affects things that we have a certain amount of anti-American sentiment around the world right now. Now, that's where he went too far. He could have stopped at Superman is not as big as Batman around the world, and Superman's never been as big internationally as he is here domestically. Unlike Batman in many cases. That is and would have been the 1,000% correct answer. But then James Gunn is going to James Gunn. And again, he brought this up himself. Why? Why even mention that? That's the frustrating part. It also affects things that we have a certain amount of anti-American sentiment. The problem, James, with that statement is that it's verifiably and demonstrably bullshit. It's absolute nonsense. Even if you believe that there is this wide swath of anti-American sentiment around the world, which I would posit to people that is largely gaslit thanks to news media, which is why the FCC chairman Brendan Carr is so happy that David Ellison is coming in and taking over Paramount and CBS to change a lot of that type of gaslighting in news media. But back to this. Why is it then that we can go and pull any number of American-made films from just this year and call it out? Let's see, James, how much anti-American sentiment has impacted. Let's see what's out right now. Nope. Jurassic World's doing fine. Almost $400 million internationally. It must be all that anti-American sentiment from China with almost $80 million. And again, Jurassic World is one of those very, very few franchise movies that still does really well in China, regardless of China having basically closed Hollywood off almost entirely. Okay, that is still a movie that hits hard over there. That and things like Transformers and others, the Fast and the Furious movies, those are those rare commodities over there in China that actually perform really, really well. The UK seems to be doing fine. Mexico seems to be doing fine. Germany, France. Okay. Jurassic World is doing okay. Let's go here. Let's go over to the annual box office 2025 worldwide. Let's do that. Apart from Ni Za 2, which was a Chinese movie. Let's see. Lilo and Stitch did almost $600 million internationally. Must be all that anti-American sentiment. A Minecraft movie. Another Warner Brothers picture. Right? Minecraft was a Warner Brothers release. The same company that is distributing Superman. $530 million. Must be all that anti-American sentiment out there. Jurassic World. How to Train Your Dragon, $343 million overseas. Mission Impossible, almost $400 million overseas. F1, that's still out in theaters right now, $309 million overseas. Well, son of a bitch, there sure is a lot of anti-American sentiment out there. You know, this is the problem. And thank God that he didn't make this statement 2 weeks ago before the movie came out, because this would have been another boondoggle. At this point, the movie's out. People have already decided if they're going to go see it or not. Which, again, I don't care all that much about James Gunn. James Gunn is a hardcore leftist idiot. I don't want him to screw this up for Warner Brothers. I don't want him to screw this up for Zaslav. Shut up, James. You got a movie in the box office right now that's doing okay. It's not great. It's not failing. It's doing decent. You're about to cross over $500 million after 17 days for a proof of concept kind of film that I think will have some decent longevity, mostly for younger audiences, which clearly this is what they were going for. We talked about this. Again, the big bellwether is going to be what happens this Halloween. How many kids are going to show up at the front door wearing Superman costumes? Let's see. I bet you it's going to be a lot more than in the last 10 years. I have a feeling, because of the way this movie scored with those young audiences. But James comes out here and does James Gunn stuff. There was no reason to add that. This is the problem. This guy, James Gunn, probably has some level of anti-American sentiment, or at least certainly an anti-Trump, anti-MAGA sentiment. And again, this is another one of these projections by Hollywood people onto everybody that, because I feel this way and I live in my little Los Angeles whole bubble, that everybody thinks this way. No, James, they don't. Shut up. Talk about your film. You had the perfect answer right up until you didn't. Superman is not a known commodity in some places. He's not a big known superhero in places like Batman is. That affects things. That's it. That was the answer. That was the correct answer. He had to put the politics in. He had to inject his own personal feelings into that answer. Because, again, the answer is verifiably, demonstrably false. Why would somebody just single out Superman with quote-unquote anti-American sentiment overseas when they have not seemed to have done that with any other film this year? Just yours, James. And the run isn't over. I still don't know how he explains how he says, hey, the word of mouth is out there. The audience is picking up even internationally. And then in the next breath suggests that the international box office is depressed because of anti-American sentiment. Which is it? Which is it? I actually thought the international box office was coming along fairly well, especially when you consider that China is not the monster that it was in 2013. And there's no $10 to $12 million coming during this run from Russia. That's off the table. There's almost $70 million, or probably reasonably $50 million between the China variants between 2013 and now, probably close to a net of $50 million that basically is off the table for you internationally. I don't know. Maybe he's just feeling a lot of pressure about this movie. Maybe I'm being too harsh. I don't think I am. But yeah, as much as I'm, like I said, we call balls and strikes. And a few weeks ago, I didn't like the way that his comments were somewhat twisted to fit a headline that got a lot of people riled up, which I understand, totally do. But when I read it, I'm like, he didn't exactly say that. This time he said it. And he gets called out for it. Stupid. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.